Your route is lined. Good on signal indication. Roger that. All clear ahead.
Welcome back to today's American Flyer Trains. The purpose of this video is to bring to conclusion the rebuild of 21, or better known as 21234 or just 234 Chesapeake and Ohio GP-7 Type 1 from 1959 to 1961. This video, and I hope it'll be the only one that's needed, will bring that to final conclusion. I had previously produced 7 months ago 10 videos that I thought demonstrated and showed the thorough rebuild of a GP-7. It had some intermittent problems that I thought the complete strip down and rebuild would alleviate those problems and bring it back to normal operating conditions. Fortunately, a viewer of that last video noted to me recently that he didn't see anything being brought to conclusion, only that the problems were still there until I collaborated with someone. A brief history was that after the rebuild, it operated on my layout, sent it to the owner. It did never operate on the owner's layout, or it operated very briefly and stopped again, returned it to me, and it didn't operate on my layout, or at best it was operating very intermittently depending on what part of the track it was on, or the roughness or the track. So what this really demonstrated is the value of collaboration and partnership with others that are well versed in the rebuild and the anatomy, I should say, and then the thorough scientific type rebuild of these trains. And it was at that point that I could not determine what was causing the intermittent issues with this train. I had looked at everything. I thought I had corrected the issue because these GP-7s attach the ground to one of the components, I think the field, to the chassis, just a direct solder. And at one point that solder point had come off, and I'd put it back on and it was working again, but apparently that really wasn't the root cause. Collaboration and partnership pay off. Doctors ask other doctors for second opinion. Golfers ask caddies for opinions. Players in any sport ask the coach. They're going to be carrying out the final solution in the execution, but it never hurts to gather as much feedback, including peer review of something like this, or even in sports. As I pointed out in part 10 of this video, I stayed on the phone for an hour with another individual who I consider to be at least one of the top 2 to 3 restorers of American Flyer trains and knowledgeable of their nomenclature, their operation, their mechanical, electrical, and cosmetic components. We worked for an hour stepwise through everything that I had done on this train, had performed to try to bring it back to an operating condition. One by one, we stepped through it while he was on the phone with me, and I stepped through it to test it. And it wasn't until we came upon the we're going to throw up our hands, we just don't know what it is, that he said, oh, by the way, same story I was told in part 10 video, by the way. Oh, by the way, did you ever give this the test of spinning the armature? And I said, no, but I've tested the armature for shorts in every way that Hannon described, and it passed all of them. So he said, why don't you, while I'm on the phone, put power to it and simply spin the armature. And by that he meant while it was on a track stand, take something that's wood, not metal, and just flip the armature and see if you can get the train started. And I tried it in both directions, and sure enough, in one of those flips, it took off. And what that demonstrated was that one or maybe two of the bars on the commutator were not functioning. They either didn't have electrical flow, there was some reason that it was not functioning, because once the rotation got going, and that's the reason for the spin test, a very rapid spin test, is that once it got going, its momentum carried it to the next bar that was active, and it kept going. But it could also stop. And it wasn't until then that I decided to pick this up and take a close look, and that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to show this in some still photography later on, because that's all I have left from that T234 rebuild. What I discovered is that there were two solder points going from the bar to the wind on the armature that were not connected. Two of these. And when you see the still photograph, you're going to see one in which you can clearly see the wire coming from that portion of the wind on the armature going to the tab and being wrapped around it, just wrapped loosely around it, but there was no solder on it. Two of those. Now I'm only going to photograph one because they were both the same way. It's as if they were never soldered, or at a later stage in its life, somehow these solder points were damaged and knocked off. All I did was resolder the wind from the armature to the bar on the commutator, two of them, and it corrected the problem 100%. That was the root cause. Now the soldering of these is not a slam dunk. As you can tell, it's a very delicate soldering process. You don't want to overheat this component, but you do want to get a drop of solder on there. It has to be really neat, because if this solder point right here, for example, is too large, there's a possibility it's going to collide with the portion of the motor that wraps around it. So what I did was I got the solder on there. I then manually put it together and spun it, making sure that nothing would collide with these points. And this is what the person I collaborated with that said, oh, by the way, let's try the spin test. So I did exactly what he suggested. I filed these down until I got clearance on all of them on that particular train, and it was off and running. No problems. It shows how difficult it is to identify things like that, and to be looking at something and never see it. It's like hearing or listening but never really hearing what is said. Once the solder was on there, it was good to go. But how that happened is beyond me, but it totally explains why there were such intermittent issues. Why vibration on certain parts of the track would suddenly stop the train. Why it would run for a couple of minutes and then suddenly stop. Cold. It was a perfect situation, and we knew right away what it was. So the soldering did that. And this should bring to conclusion what the root cause of that 234 GP-7 Chesapeake and Ohio that is in that previous video series from 7 months ago failed to demonstrate or failed to show, is that this was the root cause. You'll actually be able to see in that still photograph how loosely that wire is around it. As a matter of fact, you can just see the wire. I mean, it's just very clear that it's just wrapped around it with no solder. Thanks again for watching Dave's American Flyer Trains.